You're gonna miss it. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And we did see a recording, right? We did see the message. Yeah. Because I'm off. Are you off now? Well, wait a minute, I'm still hearing, Okay, let me test out. Yes, now I did. It's interesting, turning it off just on Zoom doesn't do it. You have to turn it off on your computer. Yeah. Hello, is this on? Yes. Good afternoon, and I'm going to call this meeting to order, and it is 4:01. So I'm going to just do a roll call. Nona, you are here. Wanda,
Here.
you're here. MJ is here, and I am here, Jennifer Hammer. Okay, so I'm going to call this meeting to order, and our town council liaison, Craig Taylor's here. Good afternoon, Craig. We're going to begin with oral communications for items not on the agenda, and I'm going to start by announcing that our very long-time Conservation Committee liaison, Nona, this will be her last meeting. She is stepping down and letting someone else take her place. And I would like to note that Nona was only supposed to serve a 1-year sentence. And instead, she has been on this committee, well over 2 years now. Almost 3 years. And I'd like to think it's because she enjoyed working with us so much. But I just would like to say, not only have you've contributed so much to this committee, but I'd like to thank you personally, because it has meant a great deal to me to have you on this committee, and you have been so supportive, and you are just one of the nicest people I have ever met. So I am going to personally miss you a great deal, and this committee is going to miss your incredible work. So thank you so much for almost 3 years of wonderful contributions. So thank you, Nona.
Thank you. I've loved serving on this committee. It's been, as liaison, it's been really fun, and I feel like it's a super productive committee that has a very positive impact on the town. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Also, if anyone is interested in joining the committee, we have an opening, because we did have our member Dee Bailey move out of town a few months ago, and we'd love another member. Please contact me or the town if you're interested. And does anyone else on the committee have something that's not on our agenda? MG, I think you do.
Yeah, so Denise and Nia asked us to make sure that everyone realizes we have red flag warning days coming up Thursday through Saturday. Oh, who's here? Yeah. We're expecting high winds, and so Selena posted something in PV Forum that has a lot more information, things to avoid: barbecues, fire pits, smoking outdoors, parking on dry grass, and she also mentions reviewing your wildfire evacuation checklist. Make sure your go bag's ready. If you have time to blow the leaves off your roof and gutters, do that, and move any wood away from your house. So make sure your car is full of gas. So anyways, you could read that all on PV Forum, and I just want to make sure everyone's aware, and please tell your neighbors.
Does anyone else on the committee have anything? Anyone as our attendees have anything that's not on our agenda? And you know what, gosh. I could be able to see everyone, and I don't see anyone else. Okay. Yes, okay, sure.
Who would we even contact? That was a joke.
I
Sorry.
think it was on the forum, and I certainly have gotten numerous messages. Oh, yeah, of course, Lori.
Okay.
Kim, is that something the fire district would do?
So we have it up on our website. We pushed out information to the towns already to post on PV Forum and every other communication avenue they have outlet, as well as, I mean, we're doing it for the whole district, so both towns. We also, tomorrow, we're putting up, we have 4 locations at main, I guess, segues into the town, into the whole district of, red flag warning signs that we're putting up that are from Woodside Fire that's telling people red flag warning, as well as with our website. So they can go to that website if they want to get more information, not just for red flag, but so that they know what red flag means and what do they have to do because of it. So we're putting out as much communication to everything that we can.
Is that also an SMC alert?
The Department of Emergency Management, they will issue that tomorrow. They're scheduled tomorrow's Thursday. Yeah, they're scheduled to put it out tomorrow because the red flag warning doesn't start till 11 p.m. tomorrow. So they'll put it out sometime tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll email Elizabeth right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Huh. So that should be something also we get mechanized, where when you give the town that information, they shouldn't have to wait for a town committee to send it out. That should be something we mechanize that.
I would not think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I sent it directly to Corey, so she knew what we were putting out to the public and so that she was aware that that was there.
Because yeah, I don't remember where I saw it.
Because I don't
but-
know, Carrie is who I used to send everything to.
Yeah.
So. Okay, I'll have to add her to my contacts. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know where I got that message from. Oh, good catch. Okay. So, before we start with, the fire marshal, we're going to approve the minutes of June 19th. Okay, do I have a second? Okay, show of hands. Okay, they were approved unanimously. And then I think we can move on and our secretary can catch up with the notes. Okay, so we are delighted to have once again our fire marshal here, Kim Gigliotti, and we are so grateful that you attend all of our meetings. You've been a tremendous resource for this committee and the community. And I know these attendees are here just for your presentation. So she's going to not only give us a quick update maybe on some of the other things that are happening, but she's going to give us a presentation on home hardening.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see everybody again. It seems like it's been a while. So in doing a home hardening workshop or presentation, it was difficult to come up with newer material because there's been a lot of information that's been out there for a long time. And so I've been reading, IBHS has put out a new report that they put out in last year in 2023 that really highlighted a lot of just confirming things that have already been said, which was good. It's nice to see that there's consistency. So I decided to title this presentation, it's not just about defensible space. Defensible space is important, but there's other measures we also need to consider. And one of the things that I thought was capturing in is we're adapting to fire. Fire's always going to be here. We can't do anything about it. It's a natural resource in our world. So we just have to learn how to live with it and the things we need to do to mitigate that. So in the beginning portion of the presentation, I'm just going to go quickly over history, how fires spread, the most common reason homes burn, and then into the home hardening. I'm going to really just breeze through this because I'm going to provide you all with the slide deck so you can post and anybody can watch it at their own time. There are some slides that have a lot of wording information, and I did that on purpose, not because I was going to read it, but because I knew people are going to have it and they can just have time to actually read through stuff. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about this image that I picked here. I came across this image and it just made me think this isn't our surrounding, but it kind of is if you take it into the sense of fires can be controlled. Fires can be controlled into an environment when they only have that fuel to burn and then that's it. Once we take away the science out, you know, there's the science, the triangle, everyone's heard the fire triangle. When we eliminate those different parts of that, the fire is extinguished. So that's kind of the idea of when we're doing home hardening and defensible space. It's looking how we can best mitigate that to keep that fuel from it'll burn out and be done and not keep going towards our homes. But before we even get there, I think it's important to understand a little bit about the history of our California wildfires. Wildfires have been going on for a long time. And this is a really wide timeline, but the focus was more, if we look into 1889, 1933, 1991, I mean, the fires happened, they were just more spread out. But then we came into 2017. And that's when this every year California is burning started to really come up was in 2017. It was the first of the most devastating fires we had, the Santa Rosa fire that took all of Coffey Park. And it destroyed 1,300 structures. It was the first fire that we really had that many deaths to report on. There's 22 deaths in that fire. And then it just seemed like we were just on this trend of 2018, 2020, 2021, 22, and we can keep going on. But some of these fires in our history in 2018, not only was it a large fire, but it took more lives than most of the fires, a Camp Fire, than we've had in our history. Another interesting one was there was one in 2020, the August Complex. That one destroyed I'm going to say 935 buildings as opposed to other fires that have destroyed many more structures. But it burned over 1 million acres, which for me is like, that's such a huge number in our state to have burned. So when you compare, there are some devastating fires where they burned a lot of acres, and then there's the devastating fires that are actually because it took so many structures. I thought this was interesting. CAL FIRE had put this out on one of their presentations. And because I think there's a reclassification and mentality that we have to have as residents, because we are so hung up on having these fire hazard severity zone maps, which are important, but not important when we're talking about how the fires are spreading when there is a wildfire. So it was interesting to see that if you were to take each class all the way from non-wild urban to moderate to high and very high, the number of structures that were destroyed in the fires in 2017, you'll see that the homes in the very high fire hazard severity zone were lower than our high and moderate. And it's the reason why, and one of the biggest reasons why, is because people know they live in the very high. So being up there in the very high, they are more proactive on doing things, on making defensible space, creating home hardening, all those different things. Whereas those in the moderate and high, because it wasn't part of law back then, law didn't require the moderate or high to do the defensible space, but in our state law, it was required in the very high. So that's why you'll see some of those differences. I just thought it was a very interesting statistic, but also a reminder of it doesn't really matter what zone we're in. The fire knows no boundaries. Once it burns, it's going to keep burning until it doesn't find any more fuel. And the flying embers, which is really through research is what we're seeing is what's actually destroying more structures than the fires themselves. They don't know they have no walls, no boundaries either. So this is Coffey Park. It's an image of what Coffey Park looked like when it was intact before the fire. If you look at the next picture, every single home is completely burned to the ground. But you'll see that there's vegetation around. The trees, they have been burned, but they're still there. They're still standing, but our buildings aren't. And there's a change in our mentality when it comes to a paradigm shift, because that's where we're at. We have to start changing how we do things, how we see things, how we accept things. And it doesn't help that the housing that we're going through, California law puts housing that we're in this housing crisis and we need to create more. Well, we know in this district, creating more is not helpful for us at all. We're creating more structures in already limited access with roads and egress and ingress routes. And I know it's a challenge that the towns are facing. They have to do this because state is requiring them to, but it's not going to help the problem that we're going to be facing with wildfires because we're going to have more developments, more construction, more structures. So it just goes to explain that because of that, that means we have to do even more work to start shifting how at least new construction, we already know there's a lot of laws and things and codes in place, but for those that are existing that have been here for a long time, they're going to have to make changes along with that if they want to survive with everything that's going to be coming in. I just thought this was a great picture. It kind of introduces what an ember storm looks like. We call them firebrands, but they do fly for many miles. And they do cause spot fires in a lot of areas. And sometimes those spot fires may be the plant that's right in front of your window of your house, or in the wood mulch that's right in front of your house underneath the windows. So a little bit about embers. They fly. They also, because of the smoke and heat in the air, smoke and heat creates a lot of pressure, and the pressure drives a lot of what gets moved in our air. The embers fall different areas. They create more fires for us to have to go mitigate. And especially when we're looking at structure protection on a firefighter side, they're looking for all these spot fires to see where they're going to go and how it's going to affect whether it's nearby communities and neighborhoods. So they'll be carried by wind, convective currents, and start small spot fires throughout. This was just a picture. This is a firefighter who is at someone's house. It's an ember storm going on, and he's just trying to protect the structure that where he's at behind him. And this is what they do. There's not much, when you look at it in this way, sometimes we think like firefighters and the fire efforts that get done is going to stop the fire. It doesn't really stop it. It still has to take its toll. It has its journey. We're just trying to help minimize it from getting it bigger. But even with that, we've seen a lot of fires where we have thousands and thousands of resources and it's not enough. So this is why we need to start retraining and thinking how things are going to be affected. So along with the embers and that flying, we also have radiant heat, which is how houses start from house to house. If one house is burning, or if it's a tree or a plant that's burning, that heat is enough heat to start getting a structure on fire, especially depending on what that structure is built of, what it's made of. There's no secret that wood burns, and but there are ways to protect. If we still have a wood house, there are things we can do to help that. There's also the direct flame contact. So if we have a lot of combustible stuff on our decks, on our balconies, a broom, there's an example here. I mean, it was a simple broom. Embers caught it, started burning. That's what started to get the structure burning. Just a simple broom on your deck. Who would think that a broom would create that much damage? But that, along with all the flying embers, that's a flame contact. So we ask ourselves, how and why do homes burn? Well, this is a lot of information. So again, like I said before, it's for people to read on their own. But we've seen houses that have burned that have been part of wildfires, and I'm going to show that in the presentation, and have survived. But there's homes like this one that is almost completely gone. There's the fireplace that was left. And everything that's kind of left standing is everything that was not made of wood. It's everything that's made of cement, brick, masonry materials. But this was an example. Look, all the green vegetation, bushes are there, they're good, but it's those flying embers. And the flying embers, I tell residents when we do home assessments, because they're concerned of certain trees. And a lot of times I tell them, your house will burn way before the tree does. Your house may actually be the cause that burns the tree, because it's not just tree or vegetation to structure. There's also structure to vegetation for exposure. And that sometimes is the case. It's actually the house that burns, and then it starts to burn the rest of the vegetation. So the paradigm shift we need to be changing is from a built to burn to a built to resist. That's kind of the mindset where we have to start moving towards. And that's why the two things is the 100 feet of defensible space. The studies have shown, and I have a slide that's interesting that shows where that 100 feet of defensible space kind of came from, but why that number was the number that said, hey, this is a good number to reduce any kind of structure ignition from vegetation, keeping that separation, and also looking at the construction vulnerabilities, which is what this presentation was about, was home hardening. So your home can survive a wildfire. And this house here, this is what was very interesting about this house. There was this house that survived a wildfire. Wildfire, you could see how close it came to the house. There's a road there. Not a scratch, not a nothing happened to this house. Completely intact, had nothing. But it was well hardened, had some defensible space. 1 year later, another wildfire broke out, and it was to the rear of this house. This house again went unscathed. It was on the Channel 7 news, and I was like, wow, it's, sometimes you hear about these miracle houses. Well, we're coming to realize with more research that gets done is it's not that just that they're a miracle house, it's because of what they did to prepare, the mitigating measures they put in advance before the wildfire came. So for the home hardening, I just kind of listed out, we're going to be looking at structural failure points and the vulnerabilities of a house, of a structure, broken down by roof, vents, decks, windows, siding, and vegetation, your defensible space, which is very minor. I do have a section in here on eaves, and I'll talk a little bit more about eaves once I get to it. But the reason I didn't include it is because as I kept reading more research, there's really not enough data out there to support the evidence of enclosed versus open is really making a difference. The biggest difference is the gaps within your eaves and in your soffits, and what leads to that's what is the actual problem, is if there's gaps. And we'll look at that in a few future slides. So the roof and the gutters are the top priority. Everything works from the top. Embers land, they land mostly up on the roof. But the other reason is because what accumulates on the roof. So you'll see some of these yellow boxes up on that roof. Those are areas that typically your leaves and debris are going to gather. And those are the areas that are going to be the vulnerable side. And those are the areas you want to keep blowing off of your roof, especially right now, red flag warning day. Those are the days when we want to be extra aggressive and making sure that when we know it's coming, we need to start preparing and getting all our vegetation under control. Because leaves fall all the time. We know this. We know the accumulation. It's part of every day, but you're not going to sit there and work on it every day. But this is a time when you do want to make sure it's done. There's also the image that I was talking about. So there is a scientist, or the godfather of defensible space, and he did a study where he took vegetation and he constructed just out of wood structures. And he saw how close a structure would be to ignite. And as he kept started to see that the further away it was, because don't forget, we have radiant heat. Radiant heat is what we're talking about, vegetation to structure. So kind of that it was actually like 78 feet or 80 feet was around the number, but 100 was just a nice round number to just, hey, it's extra cushion. But if you look at this, you could see what the differences are in percentages of structures burning, wood roofs versus roofs that are fire resistant roofs, so more like the class A's. And the further away you are from that vegetation or from those trees or forested areas, the further away you are, the lesser percentage you'll have on that impact from that fire. So in your roof assembly, really important, you'll see the leaf accumulation. Like I said, it's blowing all that debris off. You'll see on the yellow squares on the previous picture, this picture below that actually shows the fire, that's exactly where that yellow square was. Leaves and stuff accumulate there, and that's where we want to make sure that we're getting all that off, because there's a window right there. And that window, just from the radiant heat and the heat building up, will eventually give out. And once we get any kind of heat, smoke, flames into your house, that's kind of the end of the story. On these types of roofs, you'll see the ones, so they have filled part of it with like any, bird stop. And those are the ones that are going to be your vulnerability. So you want to make sure if you have roofs that have those kind of gaps that you're filling them in. This is just more pictures of just showing when you walk around your house and you look at your roofs, anything that has cracks or openings, those are all going to be your vulnerable areas of where heat can get in and the embers can fly in. Embers are so tiny, they fit into our hands. They're just small products of trees and bushes and grass and debris and from structures that they just fly. They'll get right on in there. So you'll see the edge of the roof. The picture on the left shows you what it looked like. On the outside, it looked fine. But when you look inside, there was actually a gap between the sheathing of the top of that fascia inside the attic. So what the homeowners did was you just had to caulk it, just seal it with some caulking just to close it up. You can also put the metal angle flashing on the outside. Some people do that to protect it. And then on the right side, you'll see the difference. You'll see that the ember accumulation, once the flashing was put in place, there was no more intrusion. The gutters are the other problem because we know how much they like to accumulate, especially if you have pine needles. Pine needles really get in there. And so being, that's going to be something where you're going to have to keep up with keeping those gutters clean and have a screen on there to protect them from really getting too many into your gutters. Questions always come up on plastic gutter versus a metal gutter. So you'll see in the right picture, the larger one, the plastic gutter is the one that's more to the left. It burns, it melts, it'll fall. The right where the metal gutter is, that one's still standing. The fire that's burning there is because there was debris and leaf accumulation, but it's still in place, it's still intact. But what happens when you have heat or something that melts like that plastic with your vegetation that's below it or mulch that you might have below or whatever you have below it that can burn, that now just became a source of ignition. If those plants were already burning, they will. Which is why if there was no fuel there to begin with, if we make sure we have our zone 0 of that hardscape area, if that piece of plastic fell, it would just burn out eventually. It would just melt and be done. But when we keep fuels around to keep fueling fires, it's just going to keep burning. Skylights, it's always a big question. Skylights are hard because they will give in after a while. There's not much you can really do other than just keeping the accumulation of leaves away from it. I mean, it will take a while for those, for these skylights to give out, unless there's stuff around it that can burn to help kind of to make them finally give up and break. So if you can keep that clean, then your skylights pretty much, they'll just withstand for as long as they can. The vents are the next priority. There's lots of different types of vents in our house. We have under the eaves, we have them on the roofs, we have the gable ends, we have on the foundation. The image below, sometimes people think that the vents that have been on their homes for a while, they believe that that is the 1/8 and visually they're like, oh, but it's so small. I know it looks small, but it's really not the 1/8 inch that you want. If you take a ruler to it, it should be like really teeny. So that was just a comparison of how much larger a 1/4 inch mesh as opposed to an 1/8 inch looks like. And just so people can kind of get a visual of what that looks like and the type that they should have. This was a video, a lot of this information, IBHS, great website. I highly recommend if you really want to know a lot about everything. IBHS puts millions of dollars out in the research that they do, and they have really great reports and information. But anyway, this was a video, a study that they did on how the embers flew in through those vents and into the attic space. It'll take a while for those to burn in your attic space, but if you store and have combustible storage and what most people do, what you have your Christmas decorations or your Halloween or whatever you have up there, those embers are going to land in there, and then that's going to be your fuel load right there. Those are just going to be enough to get it burning, and then your house, eventually the ignition of your house. So this was just to see how they do fly in. Other things to be cautious of in your attic is there are accumulations of, sometimes they just have all the insulation is accumulated there. Or if you do have gaps, you will get a lot of leaves. Or if there's rodents. Rodents make great nests. They find ways to bring nests to areas. So it's just keeping a visual eye in your attic space and making sure it's kept clear and that it's well protected. These are different vents that are approved by the State Fire Marshal's Office. Different companies make them. I just gave some examples here of different types that are available out there and what they look like. And, you know, because every vent is for a specific purpose, whether it's for your underneath your house or if it's for a gable, it just all depends. So there are lots of companies out there and they are approved by the State Fire Marshal's Office. Decks are a big one that's very vulnerable because of what we keep on them. And also because of, it's not so much what they're made of. I don't know, if you've ever started a fire, it's hard to start a fire on a flat piece of wood. Like if you try to light it in that horizontal position, but if you put a piece of wood in a vertical position, fire moves a lot quicker. So it's not so much the wooden deck that's the problem. It's what we keep on there as well as the gaps in between them. So when you have those gaps in between, that's where embers can get stuck and they just kind of start fizzling and they just start working their magic and eventually can and will burn that part of the wood. But sometimes they'll only burn that much and not the whole thing. It just, again, it depends on what's around it. But there are ways to protect it. You can put flashing. I've seen a lot of people put flashing in between the grooves of their decks to protect the decks from burning. But again, a lot of words of information, but it was more for people to just read on their own and give them recommendations and assistance on what they can do with their decks. Lattice. So there's two things with the lattice fences. It's not a solid piece of wood. It will burn, but it won't burn as quickly. And sometimes the embers just fly through them because of all the gaps and openings. So it's not such a big deal when it's not attached to your house, because the whole thing is we just don't want to create extra fuel that's touched your house. If it's separated, you know, it usually will do fine. But when it's attached in this type of way, this is something that would create a lot of fuel load and burn. So it's always important that if we're going to implement something like construction-wise or plants, that we pay attention to what kind of materials we're using and how we're placing them. Storage under the decks, not a good idea. Again, we're increasing that fuel load. That's just, I mean, that's basically you're just getting your deck ready to burn. You know, it's like creating your fire with your logs and your kindling. So keep it clear. If the decks are less than 3 feet of height, it's recommended to enclose them, whether it's with some of wire mesh material, something that's non-combustible, because most people, when it's 3 feet or lower, people aren't going to really be crawling in there to keep it clean, because that's all, again, leaves, debris, everything gathers underneath the decks. So if it's taller than that, most people will get in there and kind of clean it up. But when it's lower than that, we recommend enclosing it. This was a fire that happened in 2012 in Colorado. It was just an interesting fire because it actually wasn't from, it was from flying embers. But the embers, as you could see, it's not so much just, it's part of the deck. You can see it's the front of the house. So from my understanding, there was a lot of combustible material and plants up like right in front of the house, like the sliding glass door and all that. And once those windows gave out because of the combustible material in it, it blew out the windows and then everything started to catch. And now all the furniture that's on the deck also became part of that fuel and they all started to kind of work together to keep burning. So attached structures, it's not so much that it's the structure itself that's the problem. It's again, what we have on them. In our ordinance, we recommend the fence, if it's connected to your house, to be less to that first 6 feet that's connected to your house to be made of something non-combustible, whether it's metal, iron, whatever, anything but wood is at least 6 feet. So you create that separation. But this is just showing you how anything that's attached, and I just found that it was from a fire that that we were part of. But this is the lattice or the lattice that was burning. That type of fencing, it burns slow, but it does burn. It's not that it burns as fast as a fence would and create that real quick candle wick, but this burns slow, but it will still keep burning. So you could see with the fences, because some people ask, well, do I need to also do zone 0 at my fence? And it's a good idea to do a zone 0 at your fence, or at least maintain whatever vegetation you have at your fence, especially if your fence is attached to the house and you don't want to replace that. There's things you need to, sometimes you got to decide, well, which one are you going to do? Okay, at least maintain your vegetation so that your fence that's attached to your house doesn't become a candlewick, or you can replace that and you can settle a little bit on the vegetation. So a lot of times it's a give and take of how you're going to manage your house, but you do have to do something. So this was just an image that shows replacing the fence to 6 feet from your house with something iron, metal, whatever. This was a photo that I found from a fire. This is how a fence caught fire and how it brought it all the way to the house and catching the house on fire. And this is exactly what would happen, is that's why we call it the candlewick. It's a candlewick to your house, wooden fences. It's a hard thing. That's why the wooden fence isn't the problem. It's separating it from your house. That's all. You want to have a wood fence around your property, that's fine. Just don't attach it to your house. Keep it away from your house. That way, if it does burn, it'll end. Once the end of that candlewick, you know, just like any candlewick, if you were to cut it, it's going to stop burning. It only gets as far as you let it. The windows are important only because they're only as good as they're maintained, and the type of windows you have. If you have a wood frame around your window, probably not a good idea. If the wood on that trim starts to burn, it will, through radiant heat, eventually make the window give out. The windows can only last for so long. So the arrows are showing the projection of how wind would blow and how the embers would blow. So if you have windows with ledges, especially if they have ledges, not wood. I mean, replace it, or you could put a metal lining over. I've seen some people put like copper and fold it, or have, because copper is softer, they kind of melt it around as their ledge so that it's not something that burns. So, I mean, I've seen people get really creative with what they do. But again, it is a thoughtful, it's a thinking process when you walk around your house and you start to measure out what are the ways that a fire would start at my house, which is why when we do those home assessments, we walk with people and we talk about, even though the home hardening is not in our ordinance, it's just as important. And we want to make sure that we're still advising and guiding people on things they can do for their homes. This is another picture. This is what it finally looks like when the window kind of gives out and now the embers fly in, or fire front blows in, and everything pretty much burns. So when the window fails, that's kind of it. And that's where we start to look at what can we do to assist windows so that they don't fail? And that's the question. It's not so much they will fail eventually, but if we're going to speed up the process, how do we slow the process down should be the question. And one of those ways, I'll show you in another picture, but one of those ways is what's in front of that window, what's below that window. That's in our ordinance. We are making modifications for people who have existing construction, but not if there's a window. If there's a window, there shouldn't be any vegetation. It should just be taken out, because again, we're trying to eliminate those vulnerabilities and trying to build your house to be the most resilient we can make it if a fire comes through. This was just another picture because of just since it's kind of a window category, are the skylights. So it just gives you different images of what skylights would look like and what they would do. The most important thing on skylights, if they do open, make sure you close them, especially on a red flag warning day. Everything should be sealed in your house. Windows, everything should be closed, and remove all the debris from around them. So there's different types of windows. There's a single pane, which is the most vulnerable to radiant heat. Double paned, it's better than single. And then there's a tempered glass, the most resistant to radiant heat. So those are kind of the levels of eventually where you'd like to get to. I never knew this till I started here at Woodside, but I didn't realize how important screens were on your windows. I just always thought, to keep the bugs out from flying into your house. But screens, metal screens, they actually protect. So if your window does fail, it can still keep the embers from flying in because it's that screen of protection. And as long as it's metal, it'll withstand. So just a little longer, hoping that it can keep those embers from flying in any sooner. So it kind of slows the progression. So to our conversation about eaves, open and boxed eaves, the more research that has been coming out, I mean, they've done research on the campfire, the Tubbs fire. I mean, there's been lots of research in all these fires. And there's really, even though the recommendation for a long time, and I know Chapter 7A, and I know Portola Valley is enclosing them and boxing them. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm not saying that that's not a good idea, but I just haven't been able to find, when people straight ask me, I'm just like, I haven't found enough evidence that supports that one way or the other is better. The whole thing is protecting it from any intrusion. That's what it is. And that's why the boxed eaves were a great idea, because it closes everything up and it doesn't allow that intrusion. But if we can find other ways to protect our attic spaces or any kind of intrusion into our structure, then, I mean, especially for existing construction where people don't have a ton of money to be enclosing all their eaves and boxing them in, it's not a cheap bill. So one way is to look at all the vulnerable, all the openings, and I'm just going to skip through these. Oh, let me go back. Wow, I just like the picture of the kitty in there. It was cute. Is using caulking, and caulking, especially if you're getting your house painted, perfect time to have the painter just caulk everything, all those small openings and cracks. You'd be surprised when you walk around your house and you look how many little teeny cracks there are everywhere. And that's where you just start caulking those areas. So siding, this is probably one of the more expensive bills for your house, but there are other things you can do other than replacing siding. And one of the most important things is that 6 inches from the bottom. I don't know if you've ever noticed, I've gone to a lot of homes and I show people and I stick my hand underneath and there's like enough where I could fit my fingers underneath. There's that much of a gap. And those are the gaps where the embers and whatever you may have, even if it's concrete, looks better because there's not enough. But if you get enough embers to accumulate and your siding is wood and you have nothing behind it to protect it from getting in, so any kind of flashing to protect it, the embers are going to fly behind and that's what's going to start burning. Now, if you had vegetation and other stuff around, that's even worse. But those first 6 inches are really important between the base of your house and the foundation. And it's putting flashing or making sure that there's no gaps behind the exterior part of that wall. And that's basically pretty much what all this talks about. These were just other examples of exterior walls and siding. Again, Portola Valley has their specific requirements, but these are just things ideas and things that you can do. I've seen a few homes actually now that they've replaced the side of their house that seems at that time to be the most vulnerable given how wind patterns and their exposure because of vegetation. So they started with just that part of their house and they replaced all the siding on that side. And then they're working on doing the whole house, but that's just what they could afford now. So I was like, that's great. I mean, at least you're protecting one side. And then they took the windows off of that side of the house. So people get creative. Here's the picture I wanted to get to. So here's the vulnerability for your windows. The vegetation, the plants can create a problem. Now, if we have like succulent or larger leaf type plants that are not woodsy, they're not easy to burn, you know, those would be ones that would be a little bit more acceptable to keep. Although we are asking that they're at least 18 inches. And the reason 18 inches for height is because of flame lengths. We're just measuring out flame lengths. If that plant does burn, how high is it getting up to your window? So the whole thing is to protect your window and try to keep it from failing as long as we can. And so if you do have any of those type of plants, which are fine, at least whether if it's dirt or rocks around them, but obviously no more wood mulch. So the siding, this is just a lot of information on what makes the siding important, but I think it's not just the siding, it's everything that builds your house of these exposures to radiant heat and the different ways that things burn, but all the different things we need to do. If wood's rotting, we should be replacing it, whether it's a deck or a fence, we need to replace those things. If it's the wood siding that's also going bad, we need to start looking at what we're going to do to protect that. If you can't afford replacing your siding or doing anything because your house, let's say your house is a wood structure, then we really need to look at the exterior of saying, okay, well, then you should at least do your zone 0, hardscape that. Let's pull some vegetation away. Let's create that defensible space. So there's other measures that can be taken depending on what you can afford. But that's certainly something we do that's why every home assessment we do is so unique and different, because every house is different. Everybody's capabilities are all different. So we try to customize everything with realistic goals for people and ways for them to move forward, and not in just compliance with our ordinance. Because quite honestly, since we've been doing these, for a few months now, it's not so much the ordinance that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of people are being more proactive on what they're doing, but it's the compliance with your insurance. So we kind of put it to residents this way. What you're doing, you're in complete compliance with our ordinance. But we will recommend that if you are faced with an insurance, maybe saying that they may drop you or may not renew you, this is what they're looking for. And we'll leave that to you as a homeowner decision, what you want to do to decide on how aggressive you want to be so that you can keep your insurance. So those are the recommendations we make when we're doing a lot of the home assessments, is we'll give them the ordinance compliance and we'll give them what the insurance is looking at, because that's pretty much, they are so much more restrictive on what they want. I think eventually we will get there with our ordinance, but this was already a lot to implement and to put on residents that we wanted to, I guess you could say, soften the blow and make it more in stages. So we'll get to that stage. Once we get to that stage, now it'll be easier to move on to a different stage. So that's kind of the approach to help. But with everything that's been going on and with the insurance, I think it's really motivated people to just get it done, which is great. But I'm glad that I'm not the one that it's not me giving them the bad news. It's because they will get bad news if they don't do it, I guess. So another thing we look at, and this has nothing to do necessarily with home hardening, but I just feel like it's an important thing to talk about, is our fire department access, which really, it's not just our access, it's your egress. So our way of getting in, but it's your way of getting out, is really important. I think people forget, they think that it's okay for all the vegetation to get so overgrown that it's making our already narrowed roads even more narrow, that we can barely get an engine through. There's some areas in our district that our mirrors almost got torn off because of the vegetation. And so we've had to address it with those homeowners to get those areas cleared. So it is in our ordinance. It is something that we're working on in a lot of areas for our narrow roads to try and get that height and for the widths of the for our driveways and our access. Putting this all together, this was just a great image of showing everything as a whole, what we just talked about: your roof, your gutters, your vents, your eaves, the attached fence, your windows, your siding, your vegetation, your decks. The garage was something we didn't talk about, but the main thing with the garage is making sure it closes all the way and that you have a gasket around it. There's also some videos in here that would be great. You can click on the links and watch them on your own. So the main goal is it's reducing the height of our flames with our vegetation. It's disrupting everything, all the elements of how your building, your structure will burn. So we're trying to disrupt that from happening. And then the big thing is just to remember how our embers destroy the homes with that direct flame contact and with them flying, which is why the mentality of home hardening becomes so important, because that's where they're going. I always throw this into every presentation. I think it's important for people to remember that when there is a wildfire here, it's not going to be our firefighters assessing your homes. It's going to be CAL FIRE. It's going to be fire departments that are coming in to assist. They're the ones who are going to be placing these yellow placards on your house and assessing whether your house is something that they can defend or not. And the way they look at it is, first they go make sure no one's in there. Then they check your access. So if you can get in and out easily, if you have any source of water around, and how your defensible space is. And if all those things are not agreeable, they're not going to stay and defend, because that's their lives. They need to make sure they're putting themselves in a position where they can get out safely and still defend your home. And with that, that's a QR code to our website. And I just thought this was funny, because sometimes I feel that we wish we could just tell the fire to stop, but we can't. So it's important for us to create our boundaries so we can separate ourselves.
So,
And there's everyone's contacts. That's our prevention. So anybody, our inspectors and public education officer and our fuel mitigation engineer, that's the whole team who is here to help and support. Thank you.
thank you. That was a really, really easy to understand, very thorough a home hardening presentation. I think it's the best one I've ever seen. And I really do hope that MJ can get that in a tip and put the video link, because I do think that everyone would benefit from watching that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have the committee ask questions first, and then I'm going to turn it to residents, and you can ask pretty much anything you want. I'm going to be pretty easy on the time. Okay, so does anyone on the committee have any questions?
I have a comment, not a question. I had an inspection at my house almost a year ago, did not understand most of it, but thanks to Jennifer Hammer, got a reference to a company that is sending a vegetation, they're authorized, or I don't think they're licensed, but they're approved, one for vegetation, one for home hardening, to read my list to me and go over it with me, because I didn't understand the stuff that was written. I mean, I understood it, but I couldn't picture it. So I think it ought to be made clear to people that even if they get this inspection and the report, don't stop there. You know, go get help interpreting it if you need it.
And then we're also there to help also. I have to say what it was a year ago, it's much more, it's getting better at being easily to understand for residents. We've been making changes and modifications to help residents so that they can understand it better themselves and interpret it as well. But we're always available for the questions. If people have questions on what does this mean? Because to them, it's easy, you know, they're used to this stuff. But from a resident, so it's been nice, a few residents who bring the report to our attention. They're like, hey, you wrote this? This doesn't really make sense. Like, oh, you know, it's a good idea. We should rephrase that. So we're always, I mean, the feedback is always great, how we can improve the wording and the language, because that's always something that can be changed.
Good,
So
I'm
we
glad
always
to hear
appreciate
about
that feedback.
Making changes.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I hardened my home before I was on this committee, and it was 2 months of research. I mean, it's complicated. That's the problem. It's every home is unique, and there are so many solutions. So I have a couple of questions. Does anyone else? Go ahead. No, go ahead and ask your question.
Go ahead, okay. I have two questions. One is really more from the conservation kind of committee. And it is, you know, we've seen images where the house burned and the trees didn't, but we also talk about being a certain distance from the vegetation. There's some information out there, and I don't know how good it is, that certain trees can actually slow wind speed and potentially trap embers. So coast live oaks, for example, have been suggested as trees that are actually increase the safety of your house by reducing wind speed and trapping embers. Is that something that you agree with? Are
I
you
do.
seeing that?
In some of our conferences, especially our Wildland Urban Interface Conference we have in March, one of the classes I sat through spoke exactly about that there are vegetation out there that have natural defense mechanisms that actually were for the vegetation themselves, but as a result, help us as well. And I don't know what all that vegetation is, but it was just interesting to know that it exists out there, and that it is something that has been spoken about. And, you know, some people in that area are saying, you know, it would be helpful if people knew what they were. So that's kind of where someone needs to kind of take on that project and do the research to find what that vegetation is to try to help that. And that's kind of like where the discussion ended. But the fact that it's out there, yes, absolutely, it does exist. And I've spoken to some arborists, and they are also on the same page where they say, yeah, we have knowledge that there are a lot of species and vegetation. So I believe the validity is in fact true.
That's really helpful, because we're starting to see a lot more requests for tree removals. And we're trying to think about, well, which trees are potentially protective and which are more hazardous. I have one other question, a really quick one. Are there any specific recommendations about caulk? You talked a lot about caulking all those little cracks, but are there any
So that
guidelines?
has been a long research project. There is fire rated caulking, but it is for interior use. There has been no, not enough testing that will say, oh, this is, you can use it on your exterior. It doesn't say you can't. It just doesn't confirm the same because the application is being used different and it's exposed to the elements, how well it's going to do under those conditions. But to me, I just think caulking is better than no caulking. But it is something still that we have been in discussion and researching because there really isn't a product out there that is specific for fire resistant exterior. It's interesting. We haven't found it yet. So
Say, Kim, do you have what was that phrase for like natural defense vegetation? What did you say? What term did they use?
oh, the plants.
Yeah, the trees, the plants.
What did
that
I say? I
concept.
think I said natural defense mechanisms.
Oh,
I'm not sure what I.
So I have two questions. The easiest one is, I've been following Australia and their fire resistant paints. Is that anywhere close to coming to America, these fire resistant paints?
I don't know if it's the specific ones from Australia, but I know there's been discussion in the industry of there being fire resistant paints, but they just can't seem to pass the UL requirements or the ASTM standards.
Right.
So, I mean, that's been the bottom thing. And I don't know, I don't know.
And also the one of the.
It's a constant this back and forth, but no like solution, nothing saying, okay, this is what we're
Yeah,
gonna do.
wh-
That hasn't gotten there yet.
And the problems with so many of the fire resistant paints in America, you actually have to apply to bare wood or you
Yeah.
have to sand it down. And Australia's
There's
been
an
doing
application.
a lot of research because they are the land of the wildfires.
I mean, it really, what it comes, I mean, if I was a homeowner, I know there's homeowners who have done it. It's your house. You can paint it with whatever you want. And if it gives you, if it may attribute or may work, why not? The only problem is the reapplication because it's being exposed for so much. You really don't know. You can't say that it's going to 100% work. You really don't know unless you were to test the theory. So people who have done it's like, yeah, we do it every 2 years. We just repaint it every 2 years. And if that's what they want to do, that's what they can do. But as far as a standardized answer for that, there's not one right now.
We want to be very careful because there are some companies out
There
there
are.
that have been misrepresenting what they
Yep,
can do.
there have
Okay,
been.
so my second question is, of course, the biggest issue with home hardening is it's so expensive. And one of our biggest pushes that we tell residents is, oh, it's going to help lower your insurance. But unfortunately, we're not seeing,
That
we're
reduction.
seeing tree removals and we're seeing a requestment for roof replacements because those are the things they can identify with the drones. So I know 3 years ago, there was a big push with Safer from Wildfires that they were pressing, CAL FIRE, or at least the state was pressing the insurance companies to actually have a list. If you do this or this, you can get so much a discount. With these new regulations that are happening, have you heard anything? Is there any progress in maybe having the insurance companies give a discount if you have a defensible space inspection, if you do replace your windows, something? I know it's complicated.
So from the insurance committees that I've sat on, that discussion always comes up, but no one ever gives the answer of, yes, we'll do this. Every answer is always, well, it's insurance company dependent. It depends if the owner, it's always a depends. There's never a clear, yes, we'll do that. So, but I will say that on the other side, aside from insurance, because you're talking about costing, I am in the middle of one of the fire updates is hiring a grant writer to assist in researching and finding grants. I know historically from what I've been told about Portola Valley never qualified, but I think there may be a chance that may qualify now. Circumstances have changed. There's a lot of changes in from what I've heard because of the information that has to be provided as part of those grants applications. it would be worth trying. So for me, I'd rather just try it and see what happens. So we're hiring somebody to do some research and then to do the writing of the grant itself. There's a few out there that we're looking at maybe it would be something that would be helpful for Portola Valley because you're really the only one in the district that doesn't have any kind of incentive program or matching fund program. Nothing of that exists. So anyway, that's something that is being worked on. But have you ever looked at, and I know you guys have been looking at this for a long time, CAL FIRE had for a long time a posting, and I've never actually looked at what it actually meant, but they had a low-cost retrofit guide for how you can do home hardening. Was that anything valuable at all, or did it kind of just lead to dead ends?
Well, it's very interesting information, and we had 2 wildfire fairs where we had a lot of information about that. But and we have a subset of residents that after defensible space, they went to home hardening, but it's making that push.
Okay.
And as far as the grants, because I was very knee deep in that for a while. My first concern would be most grants you have to match. And I'm not sure in the next few years whether we would be able to match a grant. Because usually it's 25 to 50%.
Yeah.
And 2, when you actually look at the amount of grants and the number of residents, it wouldn't be very much. And number 3, these grants, because this committee had proposed 3 years ago a grant program that would start very small. And that was supposed to build to show that most of these grant programs want to see that you've established something, that you're not just trying to get free money and then you're going to end the program. They want a program that they can foresee you continuing.
Right.
So 1, I don't think we could show that we would continue that money long-term. But number 2, we haven't, because that grant program did not get adopted. We don't have any track record except really our road work.
Well,
So
I'm
it's-
kind of looking at it from a different perspective. I'm actually looking at a grant that would give the fire district money to do the work of stuff so that we can then pass it on in how we're utilizing it. I've seen communities in other parts of the state that have gotten some of these specific grants because I learned about them at the conference. And the fire district or department was given, like $18 million to improve their resiliency programs. And all the money went into all these different categories, which I was looking, if we did that, then we would be able to pass it on to do that work for the residents. That way, in turn, we're still helping you, but through a different filter. So I was kind of looking at it from a different perspective.
I love it. Anything I can do, because Wanda and I are kind of the insurance and finance committee, anything we can do to help you, we are all in. Any way we can get money for this, we would just absolutely love to do a grant program. So if there's anything we
Thank
can
you.
do to help,
Okay.
let me know. Okay, so what we'll do,
I had one more. So Kim, I just looked at that low-cost retrofit list. and
Yeah.
It's pretty much everything in your slide.
Okay. Okay.
yeah, and we got that the first year. Jeremy would give us that.
Yeah, I
when he
mean,
was
it's
here.
a document that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how well vetted it was, like people actually followed that and it became something valuable. I've never gone through those channels yet.
So what we'll do is we'll take questions from the attendees. I'm going to start with the people in the schoolhouse, and then maybe we'll do one round of questions, and then David, I'll get to you. So, because I know you, questions from, no? No? Oh, okay, David, you're on.
Hi, sure. Not entirely sure it's a question, but I thought I always enjoy hearing from Fire Marshal Giuliacci. I thought I knew most of what there was to know about some of these issues, but I always learned something new. And more importantly, I think she understands how to take into account the practicalities of what the various residents in our town can afford and can do. And I'm just super impressed and super happy that we have her, so I don't know if that's a question, but thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, then I think those are all the questions, and I'd love to chat with you sometime and tell you some of the other little projects that had been done over the last 3 years to look at home hardening and try to get group discounts and things like
Yeah.
that. So a lot of things have been done, especially at the ranch as well. The ranch has been
Yes,
very
yes.
active.
Can I give two quick
Sure.
updates?
Sure.
So one, the N5 sensors, the early initiating devices that we have as a pilot program with Homeland Security, that we have partnered with Stanford and Palo Alto, they've all been installed, implemented. They're live. We're monitoring all of them. There's 13 in our fire district. It was nice that Stanford actually owns a lot of land in our district because they use their sensors to put up on those properties. So it was kind of nice. We have a great coverage between all 50 sensors between all 3 of our jurisdictions. We are working on, because we have the data and information, but we are working on a training exercise with setting one of the sensors off to watch it behave and see what it does and how it all ends up working because thankfully it could be a long time, till we actually see one, but we kind of want to be prepared to see how it actually functions. And if it functions as N5 is telling us, the difference between it knows barbecue smoke as opposed to wild, vegetation burning. So we kind of want to test the theory for our purpose and for our training, for our response so that we have an understanding. So that was one update. The other update is we are close to the end with working with Ladris and Flame Mapper. Ladris is a traffic study evacuation route kind of company who's helped us in those 2 areas for our district. Flame Mapper has done a lot of fire modeling for us, but between the 2, almost completing, probably looking into early spring with releasing storyboards, basically a report that residents can see and have an understanding of, one, from the Ladris perspective, our evacuation routes and how long it would take for different areas to evacuate, to the fire modeling side, how wildfires in different areas would affect our district and the impacts that would have in our district and in different areas, from building impact to vegetation impact. So once those are completed, we're in the writing process for it to be something that'll be delivered to the residents. So I think I'm really excited. I've seen the results, and what's great to see is a lot of the vulnerabilities in our district, we kind of already had an idea, already knew about them, but this really puts the evidence and data and technology into supporting it and really showing it so that we know where we need to put our forces. And it just kind of gives us a different awareness. And for a resident side, gives you an awareness on timing, preparation, and where our weaknesses are and where we need to improve. So it'll be exciting when that gets released. And that's the major updates I wanted to provide you all today. Thank you.
I had a question about, can you give us a little update on how all the inspections are going?
Oh, sure. Let's see. We have done, I have to think back to my numbers. I want to say we're somewhere in so far, maybe about 333 or 433. I can't remember which one it is. Inspections we've completed to date since June 1st. Still having the challenge of people are just not home when we go do them. And so we leave them a door hanger, and we haven't really heard, sadly, we have not heard from residents, calling to schedule their inspections. So we are getting to the point now, we're waiting for the end of October, since it'll be a few months since we started doing the inspections, to start calling, getting in contact with all those homeowners who haven't been calling us and reminding them that this is an ordinance and a requirement. So they'll have 10 days to comply to call us to schedule us. Otherwise, we'll have to start legal process with them. It's not the path we want to take, but if that's the kind of motivation that people need to actually call us to get their inspection schedule or their home assessment schedule, then that's the process we'll have to take. But so far, it's been very well received for the most part. There are homeowners where I'm not going to lie, the inspectors have a hard time with trying to just even have a conversation with them because they're already confrontational with the fact that they're on their property and what they're there for. So there have been places, some residents that have been challenging. But the good thing is by the end, the inspectors have kind of won them over and turned around the negative impulse they already had to something positive and supportive that they felt more agreeable and understanding, and now actually listening to what was in their mind preconceived is not in fact what was going to be required of them. So that's a good positive turn on those tables. But I know, I will say this for sure, and looking how many were getting done every month well, we started halfway through the year. So, having 6 months to do 2,000 inspections, we were really hoping we could, but there's days where the inspectors go out for 3 or 4 hours and they're walking streets and they might get like 10 done, if that, because there's just nobody around. So that's been the biggest challenge. And then the inspectors are also taking a lot of time. Some of the home assessments take up to an hour with the resident because they're answering questions, they're educating. This is the first go around, which normally on an inspection, we're kind of like, you need to get your inspection done. But for this is such a different type of inspection that we want to make sure that residents are comfortable and have an understanding and all their questions are answered and concerns. So they are taking extra time with spending time with them. So that's kind of been where we're at on inspections. It'll be great to see, next year will be a whole different gamut because it'll be a year since we've started. So for those people that we started, let's say in June, that they have their 12 months, we'll see where we are. We are keeping track to those people who are making progress as opposed to those who aren't, which that 12-month in our ordinance was only going to be granted 12 months if people were showing that they are making progress. And the way we know people are making progress is by them uploading the photos of all the things that they have changed or corrected. So when we see the photos coming in, we know they are doing work because they're providing that. Some, there's just nothing. So those are the ones that are getting reminders of saying, hey, we're 3 months in, just wanted to give you a check up that you have to start getting some work done. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
That was a terrific summary.
I will say Oakland Fire Safe Council did a great study on enforcement. And the first enforcement cycle is difficult, but after the first cycle, you usually get between 90 to 99% compliance, and everybody is happy that really people, once they get through it, they're
That's great.
really okay. I'll send it to you.
Yeah,
It's
that's great.
They did it after the huge fire, and and you're doing everything they recommend.
That's great. And speaking to the fire marshal with Santa Rosa and the fire marshal from Paradise, they had no issues. Everybody was just doing it done. I was like, well, I wish we could do the same thing here. But I mean, they're like, oh, there's no pushback. We put in the ordinance was done. Theirs is much more restrictive than ours and no pushback. And people just started to do it. And I was like, wow, wish we could get that
But-
down here. But it was
They've
a
had it for
circumstance.
longer than you have,
Yeah.
right?
And that was but that was also a circumstance that, because of the experience that people had. And I'm hoping that other people's experiences are enough to bring here of saying, we don't want to have that experience. We need to do this to prepare so that the worst case scenario, maybe we'll have a better chance. So it's just because it's the right thing to do for our community and for our neighbors. It's not just for our house, but for everybody else too.
So I have a question about the 2025 agenda. Because of the enforcement that you're doing, would it be worthwhile for us to have either Stanford or Mid-Penn back for an update on because I know they have their 5 or 10-year plan. Has that been affected by this?
Not yet.
So it's not something I should necessarily have on
Yeah,
my
not
agenda.
yet, not yet, because we are still in discussion with them, because they've been doing projects in different areas. So, like Mid-Penn, they've been up on 35 and they've been doing a ton of work up there. Stanford has been dedicating to so everyone's kind of dedicating in a certain area. It's not like everything at once because, they're putting the funding into this. So it's on a rotation. So I'm just still trying to get a handle on what that rotation is and what does it mean for a lot of our other areas in our district.
So if we asked you in January or February for you just to talk about enforcement progress, you wouldn't find that burdensome? You'd be willing to do it maybe?
Possibly.
I
Let's,
find
we
it
could, we
fascinating.
could talk about it in January. I mean, a lot happens in a few months.
Okay. Any other questions? Questions? Okay,
Thank you.
you're only a few minutes late. You get to go home for dinner. Okay. And thank you so much, as always. We just, it's a pleasure to have you. Okay, so next on our agenda, we're gonna try to see how quickly we can go through this. Discuss the insurance, change tracking form project and approve postcard for mailing in November. So really quickly, as you know, I sent a blind email out to everyone and then the town staff with a sample report of the data we've received so far. And no one had any problem with the format of the report, but there was concern expressed about when when we saw the report and the data that had come in, that maybe we shouldn't publish that to residents, that we should wait until everything was in and reflect on what should be published. Even though we had spent a lot of time designing the survey so that it would all be very benign data, when you actually get the report and you look at it, there might be people that were uncomfortable. So after talking to Carrie and Sharif, what we decided to do is that I would wait until I was about halfway done, which could mean February. It could mean we get half the responses we think we're going to get at some milestone, generate the report again, which, by the way, is not trivial because it's a very complicated report to do, because we did give lots of flexibility to residents, and therefore some of the responses have to be really thought about how to put that in a report. And then I would give it to the town manager, who would possibly review it with the town council, and then they would make a decision of what they wanted to release to the town. So I don't have the report today, but I can tell you some very benign things. So we only have 40 responses so far, which is what we intended. We never intended to have a lot of responses. The first thing we wanted to do was to make sure the questions were good and that we could generate a report. Of those 40 responses, we have 36 different streets reporting. So we're not seeing clumps of insurance changes. Most overwhelmingly, most people have only filled out the form once. We've had 8 different insurance companies involved with these insurance changes, whatever they are. Most occurrences were 2023, 2024. Overwhelmingly, people were not told any reason for cancellation or given any chance to mitigate. Overwhelmingly, when you saw either a cancellation or a premium change, the premium increased. Only one person actually had a little decrease. So the plan was that Carrie designed a lovely postcard, which I could share with you. And we were going to send it out in November. So my question to Craig is, I do have the money in my budget, Craig, to send out a postcard. But am I still, or is that, is sending out a postcard, which would be about $3,000, is this something that you want to re-examine given the financial situation in the town? And also, is there a replacement for Carrie? Because, you know, these postcards, I understand the process and you do need a town staff. I mean, I can take it to the post office for them, but you do need somebody in the town staff to give me access to the file and to send it to the printer and things like that.
So I'm not going to speak for the whole council, but I'll speak for myself. I think holding off right now, given that we're trying to look at our interim budget and the other financial issues that we're dealing with. So unless you think we have some critical information that absolutely has to get out, I think I'd wait and let's sort out the budget stuff first.
So what I will say is, I think that in November, you're gonna see, you're gonna start to see some pretty significant insurance premium changes. Because that's when the regulations are gonna hit, in the next 6 months. So the postcard was designed to kind of inform people. A very cheap option would be, I could reach out to like the mailing list for the block captains, and I could say, look, can you have people send this email to their neighbors so you know about this? But in the past, it's been said to me, we don't want to really use that list. We don't want to bother people with it. But just putting it in a newsletter really doesn't get that information out. You really have to get it to the block captains and really get it into the residences.
Well, I mean, I think we have the Firewise communities, and that seems like a very obvious channel.
Yeah, Firewise communities would be great.
Right, so we have them.
Yeah.
And I would say pushing that information out through Firewise would make a lot of sense.
Okay.
I think putting something in EV Forum and I think putting something in newsletter, I mean, that's sort of our standard way to communicate without following the postcard route. So yeah, I think we definitely should do that.
I could also maybe email the different committee chairs and ask them to put it in their meetings. Just kind of do a ground campaign rather than save the money for the postcard.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I mean, I think with the committees, some of the committees will feel like, oh yeah, this is within our jurisdiction, we'll do something. Others are going to go, what are you asking me for? But
I think they'll all help.
I
committees-
certainly like EPC. I mean,
Yeah.
EPC seems like a natural fit for
Mhm.
that. And then we've got communities, we can reach out to, through Selena. We've got WPV Ready. I mean, again, that seems like another obvious channel to reach out through.
Yeah.
But between that and Firewise, we should have pretty good coverage.
What about if I actually made a little poster and I put it up in Being Genius or something? It's kind of a town thing and so it just doesn't feel right to do that. I mean, it is on the town website, but
Well, so
poster
you're
seems
worried.
weird.
So I mean, certainly if we're going to put something up as a town thing, we need to make it sure it goes to the town manager.
Yeah.
Just for, I mean, it needs to get approved. They can't just
Okay.
don't put it up on behalf of the town without getting some approval.
Okay.
But I think, and we'd have to see what the poster looks like, but I mean, sure. I mean, if we have a place that people will see it, that seems
Okay.
reasonable.
Is
Because again,
it-
we're just trying, I mean, I don't know what this poster looks like, so I'm speaking a little
No,
bit.
no, I
blindly,
don't either.
but
I think
I'm
it would be
pres-
the postcard. It would be the postcard that Carrie created and I would
Yeah.
just cut it
Yeah.
out and it's got a,
and
QR
blow-
code.
And blow it up and make it bigger. or something. Yeah.
yeah, something like
So,
that.
I mean, generally getting that kind of information out, I mean, that all seems good. Right? I
Okay.
mean, I
Okay.
don't think anybody's opposed to getting information out, especially when it has to do with fire safety.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Any objection to that?
I think Craig's suggestion to start with the Firewise communities, we haven't done that. We should try.
And you have those contacts?
I know
With Chip?
Yeah, we have those contacts.
So I
So I-
sent you that. I'll
Yeah,
I'll
if you
create an
send
email.
it to me, I'll send it to those contacts.
Okay.
How's that?
And Selena, because you probably talked to her. Do you want me to send it to Selena?
Uh,
We'll coordinate
yeah.
this offline. Okay. Okay, so, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I need a break.
Or do you want to leave or?
No, I want to know what.
Yeah.
happened.
Oh, okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then we're going to have a presentation on the IBHS wildfire preparedness. Dave, do you still have your hand raised?
I do. I was going to make a comment on the last agenda item, but I guess it's closed, so.
No, it's not closed. It's never closed for you. Go ahead.
Um, yeah, so a couple things. First of all, I think you can do a cheesy text postcard for way cheaper, like 20 cents maybe each. So the shiny postcards and all are a different deal. I don't know if a cheap postcard would work. Second, I would love to see the report published. I think that was the whole point. We were going to get the data every month or 2 months in the WPP minutes, and I'm all for that. And anybody who doesn't want that needs to defend why they don't want that when we're all for transparency. So that's kind of a big thing. And obviously, I think putting posters up at Bianchini's or Roberts, who's actually in town, or wherever is fine. But I don't know how much that'll help, but go for it. Thank you.
The postcards for like $3,000, and I know this from the Wildfire Fair, this is the cheapest possible postcard you can make. Matter of fact, when we made them for the Wildfire Fair, we had leftover scraps we used. It's the postage because our town has to pay postage.
Yeah, let me check on that, because
Well-
if you make a postcard that the Postal Service gets to print, it can be much less expensive. And so I'll look at that, and if I come up with something, I'll email you.
Yeah, I think we can get our mission accomplished just by emailing people. I think that good old fashioned neighbors emailing neighbors ought to be sufficient. And
Uh,
as far as the report content, it was reviewed by the town staff and by this committee. And when we looked at the report, and we saw, you know, when you start to see streets and things like that listed, and you start to see the comments that people make, there was some concern expressed, and what the town said was, let's be safe. Let's get, let's not do this every week or every month. Let's get a big chunk of that data done, and then it will be released. It'll just be up to the town council or the town manager what they want to release.
Fair enough. I'd be happy to know who in the town is opposed to releasing it, and happy to email them directly.
I'm not going to comment on that.
So you don't, I mean, seriously, like,
What, Craig?
So Dave, I don't think I know anything about the release, but it sounds like this just has personally identifiable information in it. And we're trying to be sensitive to the fact that there's personal information. So is that part of what this issue is?
It really wasn't personal information. It is, I released it within the committee and within the town staff, and you saw it, it was released to you, you got it.
Okay.
And I will, I will say that once it was pointed out, I could see that people gave a lot of comments. My report was very thorough, and I reported everything people said. And people did make a lot of comments about their property and such. And it should be reviewed by town staff as a whole report before I just release it. I do,
Yeah,
I agree.
well, yeah, I certainly think it should be reviewed by staff. So
Yeah.
that part's good.
Yeah,
So
and we will. It'll
when
just
did you
be,
send it out? Because I don't remember
oh
seeing it.
gosh, it was like 2 months ago.
Okay, then I'll go back and look at my email.
Yeah.
And Dave, why don't you and I talk some more
Yeah.
offline?
I mean, there
Yeah,
was, yeah.
Craig, I totally trust you. If you review the report and you think it can't be disclosed because it would be awful, then I'm okay with it. And so I'm good with that. But if you look at it and go, okay, this is important for us to know about insurance, then I think we should release it.
I have to tell you what the information I just gave is pretty much all you're gonna know, except individual owners' experiences with their insurance companies or things that they were told by their insurance companies as far as their properties. There was nothing extreme. It was more just, we should give it thought. And the town, Carrie did say if I was comfortable releasing some information, I could, and I just released the information I'm comfortable with. But I do think that we should get a large sample. We only have 40 responses so far. Let's get 100, 200, 300 responses. Let me do a sum total report. And then let the town council look at that report and say, you know, I don't know whether the personal comments that people put down were intended to be released to the entire town. Certainly the statistics were, but you know, Craig, I mean, I will do whatever you want me to do because
Yeah,
this
that's
is a
fine.
town council issue, but this was directive from staff and this is what staff agreed to and staff's not there anymore. So,
Right, well, like I said, let
Yeah.
me go back and look at it. I can work with Dave offline and I'll talk with Corey as well. And we can
yeah,
figure out the appropriate response. I also think, given that we're about to see, I hope, a fairly seismic change in the way insurance companies are operating, I think we're going to get a lot more information in the next 4 months or something.
if
but we'll
people
see.
know about the response, because I haven't gotten anything new in a month. So what happened is when the first article hit, we got responses, but I don't think people are really focused on the insurance survey.
No, what I meant was, there's insurance regulations that are
Yeah.
being passed that in theory are going to change the way the insurance companies behave.
Yes, and premium increases are going to happen.
But cancellations may go down. I mean, so,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, anyway, so
Yes.
let's not go too deep on this.
Yeah.
I'll go back and look at my mail. I apologize because
No
maybe I
problem.
read it a few months ago and I just
No
forgotten
problem.
the details, but.
Yeah.
Yeah,
maybe-
I will
maybe
say
I'll
that
reach out.
the most likely way to get people to actually submit results or responses is to have them see results and responses. So
Yeah.
it's up to you, but if they don't, if it's all some future year ago or year from now, but if they see something coming out, and they think,
Yeah.
no, that's not what I saw, they're way more likely to contribute than they are. I honestly don't think you're gonna get a lot if you don't publish anything.
Okay, thank you. So Craig and I will work on that offline. But really, except for the specific comments, I gave you the highlight. Okay, so I skipped an item, an update on our final report and recommendation concerning decking services and PV ordinance 2022-44779A decking surfaces. As you know, Dee and MJ worked very hard on this report. We recommended some changes to the regulation that would offer more options for residences, for decking surfaces. So the report stayed with Sharif for many months because he was really busy. And then he finally gave us the okay to move forward with it. And then there was some confusion about how we would get it before the town council. So now Craig and I are working to get it on the town council agenda. I've contacted Corey, who is, I'm sure, very busy. And I will very softly be nudging her. And my understanding is that once we get it on the town council agenda, they'll vote on it. And MJ, you may have to be there if they have any questions, but I think it's a pretty obvious report and the fire marshal endorsed it. So I don't foresee any problems. So I think we have a path forward. Any questions from the committee? Questions from the attendees? Okay. Okay, so then we're going to have a presentation on IBHS Wildfire Preparedness Home Certificate and how to obtain one, which MJ did.
Okay, so, I haven't been doing much on the committee as far as the mitigation subcommittee, but in July, I did have this situation where I got a homeowner's, non-renewal letter, from my insurer, who is CSAA, also known as AAA. I got the usual 65 days notice. I had been warned last year by my insurer that my fire line rating was 6 and that she was surprised I even had a policy. So I wasn't surprised to get this letter. However, it turned out that the letter said that I could get reinstated if I earned the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home designation. The letter actually said the plus designation, but it turned out that base would be sufficient. Excuse me. With plus, there's no way I will ever get plus because I have a composite deck, and that's not allowed under the plus designation, but the lower designation, my deck was okay. So in the second column, so after I got my letter in July, it turns out that I had been working towards zone 0 for 4 years, since the beginning of the pandemic. So I had all the vegetation pretty much cleared out. And the other things I had to do was I installed 1/8 inch mesh on my vents for my crawl space. And we had recently installed new decks, but I had left this ramp unenclosed with mesh on the bottom. So I went ahead and did that. We did a lot of vegetation cleanup. I removed all the roof debris. And so it turned out within about 3 weeks or so, I applied for the what's called the DIY option. Because I'm sort of a self-taught wildfire expert, so I did not need the premium service. And this talk today is really to talk about how, even though I thought I was really prepared, this was actually for me a pretty stressful process to go through. And in order for me to get this designation, I had to do a few extra things on my house. After I went through a bunch of rounds of review with these IBHS inspectors, then they sent out a property inspector who took about 200 photos of my house, all the gutters, all the roof valleys, what the roof was made out of, all the windows, every vent, the walls. He just took huge number of photos. And at the end, after those photos were submitted, then I went through a couple more rounds of review with the evaluators, and eventually I got the certificate. And the whole process took me about 4 weeks total, because I did it all myself, all the labor. I put in about 52 hours and only about $289 of materials. So if you're going to go through this process, there is a bunch of stuff you should know firsthand. They do want to know when your roof was installed, when your house was built. And you do have to be the owner. It has to be 3 stories or less and a single family home. And this project, Wildfire Prepared Home, it's kind of a pilot in California right now. This is, and maybe a little part of Oregon. So this is the only place where you can have this done. And one of the other major features is that you do have to have a zone 0, 5-foot non-combustible buffer around your home, which means no plants at all. So on their website, they have a checklist And that's really the best way to go through what you have to do. And you have about 90 days to complete that checklist once you go through the application process. And again, there's two ways to do it, the $125 DIY service or what they call full service or premium. And those, if you go that way, and actually a guy in Ladera contacted me and he's going to go through this process. So then I'll have more information about how that works. But they supposedly will also put you, they'll line you up with the contractors necessary to do your mitigation. So this is just to show when you, after you apply, then they show you how to get your, get this checklist, and you can take a quiz where they pretty much prompt you through all the questions again. So you and they show you pictures. It's pretty similar to what Kim showed us today, all those things you have to do. So the rest of this talk is showing what I went through. Here's an example. Basically, every time I uploaded photos, then the next day I would get an email entitled "Actions Required," which is kind of a little intimidating. And then on top of that, the email would say that I had to do it that day. And if I hadn't been retired or hadn't had a job and all that, there's just no way a normal person could do this, I think. But, you know, I was really determined, and I think you really have to have that kind of attitude. Anyways, this is an example of something that kind of surprised me. I had these concrete planters next to my house. I wasn't using them anymore, and they told me I had to get rid of those. Oh, and this is the one that surprised me the most, was they required that I install this 6-inch metal flashing on all my steps, anything that was on the ground. And we did that all ourselves. We did a pretty bad job. So it doesn't look that great, but then actually after this picture, after we got the certificate, my husband spray painted them to match the deck better. Again, here's another example. I had to put metal flashing on this wood door. I also had to put metal flashing on this wood siding that's on the ground. And here I had this shed that was 40 feet from the house. So normally they only look at what you have 30 feet from the house. And actually, this car right here, that's the property inspector's car. This is the photo he took and then uploaded it. And then I had to go clean up my shed because they want 5-foot clearance around those sheds. So let's see. And then this is just an example of all the things I had done since 2020. I had installed this metal gate. I had put a hog wire fence on the other side of the house. I had removed all the hedges. You know, what surprised me, this is a current picture, but I was kind of happy that they did not make us get rid of all the vegetation in our planter boxes. You can see right in this picture up here in the corner that we spaced the planter boxes so they are 10 feet from the house. So that was okay. And if you go to this YouTube link at your leisure, I have a presentation from our last Wildfire Fair where I went over all the before and after pictures about my house and what I had been doing on mitigation. So, and this is just to reiterate that Wildfire Prepared Home is this IBHS program, but it's hard to do. It's stricter than the fire district, which Kim sort of mentioned today, that what she's doing with her assessments is she's sort of working the town and the district to the higher level. Yeah.
IBHS stands for,
It's like
sorry.
insurance, business, and home. No, something about insurance, home, and business. And
Okay.
safety or something. Sorry. But the thing to remember is that every home that gets certified to this standard, it actually makes the neighborhood safer. Basically, because you're saying your house is not going to ignite or much less chance, right? There's nothing around it to burn. But so when you get your house certified, you're making your whole neighborhood and your community safer. So my goal actually would be to get more people to do this. And so I've kind of posted on WPV Ready. I'm going to post on PV Forum if anyone wants some advice. I'm happy to share.
So I have a question. So you did this because you got canceled and they said if you did this, they would reinstate you.
Exactly.
So if you do this, will you get a discount if you're okay?
Oh, I forgot to say that. So it turned out after as soon as I got recertified and they renewed me. And then about a week later, I got a new invoice and I got a $500 discount for what AAA called fortified home. So I did get a discount for doing all this work.
So now, a lot of times these insurance companies, you can get one of 3 discounts. So if you're already getting, let's say, a Firewise discount, can you also get on top of that this discount?
Well, I have read a lot of the filings when insurance companies apply for a rate, right? And it turns out not everybody gives a Firewise discount, like AAA does not. Instead, they do this, this fortified home thing that I just got. I think what's also happening is that CDI wanted insurance companies to list these 5 different things, and for each one you get 1 or 2%. But when in all the rate filings that I've read, that not everyone, insurers aren't really doing that, and the ones that do it, it's really small, like 1% or something.
And also, you can't, I mean, you just told me this about AAA and Firewise, and I tried to find out what insurance companies would give you a discount for Firewise, and I couldn't find out that information. So you have to go through rate filing?
You have to read, first you have to find the rate filing, and then you have to read. No, then you have to download it. Some of these things are 100 megabytes, which doesn't like my UVerse Wi-Fi plan. And yeah, it is hard to figure out. Probably the easiest way is to call the insurance company and ask them, assuming they're willing to give you a policy in the first place.
So what happens next? Do you have to get recertified on some kind of regular basis, or is it once and done?
Well, it's supposed to be good for 3 years. And then every year I'm supposed to log in and upload some photos. Originally, I uploaded about 15 photos or something. But yeah, and then what's also interesting is once I got the certificate, I no longer had any access to anything I uploaded or anything that they had. It was kind of like a real black box. So
And then
who
you can
knows what they'll
pay,
bring on me next year. But I supposedly I have this 3-year thing. But like I said, to me, it's a pilot program, which means it could disappear, right? So this is just a solution for now that seems to work for now.
And it's just your insurance company.
In
is
this
not
case-
industry-wide.
Right, this is AAA is doing this.
Right.
And in fact, if
Okay.
anyone out here is a AAA, customer and you got non-renewed, you should call AAA and find out about this because, they never resent a letter saying that you could have just the base designation. And so the only letter that went out there says you have to have this almost unattainable unless you're a new house designation.
so you can also, there are companies that you can pay to do this. And they will come out and do this for you.
Yeah, supposedly with the Wildfire Prepared Home Premium service, they will line up the contractors for you. But, like I said, someone in Ladera is going to go through this and maybe we could have him talk about what he goes through.
Any questions from the attendees on this? It doesn't, no,
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry that took so long.
Last agenda item until we get to subcommittees. So I am going to, I want to discuss our next meeting schedule. As you know, I'm gone in November. And I'm thinking, given our committee size and given our list of current projects, I'm going to float the idea that maybe we don't meet every month. We maybe meet every 2 or 3 months, but we plan to have a 2-hour meeting if we need to. The things that I have on our agenda coming up, obviously, new insurance regulations and their effect on homeowners. And I would like to focus next year on, are there measures that residents can take to reduce these premiums and things? I'd also like to find out if Hillsborough's actually having less insurance cancellations because they're a fire-wise town, but I haven't found any evidence that that has happened at all, that it's an interesting idea. Also, the LRA maps are coming out and that should be in spring. And so we'll want to talk about that.
Oh, actually, I went to a CAL FIRE meeting yesterday where they said they're gonna do it in January.
Whoa.
So we'll see.
Okay.
The fire hazard map
Oh, yes.
or the LRA, which is us.
And then, of course, Flame Mapper said they would come back to present to us once the local area maps were out. And then we have this ongoing issue with the fire district enforcement. And then I know Craig mentioned that town council member Judith, I'm so sorry, Judith. I'm tired. Wants Supervisor Mueller to maybe attend one of our meetings to discuss insurance. We could even possibly have CDI come back out to discuss insurance. I don't know if there's other things, but I don't think there's enough necessarily that we need to meet every month.
Especially not as we go into November and December.
Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking January, and then we'll keep our monthly, you keep that monthly meeting on your agenda. I'm going to keep the room. I know this month the chair reached out to me and said, hey, do you really want that meeting time? You know, I will let other chairs know it's available if we're not going to use it, but let's just keep that on our agenda and then meet when we need to meet, but not necessarily every month. So our next meeting would be January, our regular time in January. We'll agree on that, especially since we're not doing a postcard. I think I'm just going to be sending out emails about the insurance survey.
That's okay with me.
I agree.
Okay. Any discussion from attendees on that issue? Okay. Okay, any subcommittee liaison updates? Anything from conservation?
Nothing from conservation.
Okay. Mitigation?
You took that off the agenda, so I didn't.
Well, no, it's, well, no.
Oh, I thought it
mitigation-
wasn't on the.
No, it's
Okay.
mitigation
No,
subcommittee.
I haven't.
Okay, finance and insurance, no, we've already discussed it. And I have it on this agenda for January 15th. So everyone's gonna be here January 15th. I know Nona, you won't be. Hopefully we'll have a liaison. Is the chair gonna let me know, or are you gonna let me know?
So if all goes well next week, I think that there will be an appointment and Catherine McGill, the chair, would let you know.
Yeah. And if the new volunteer wants to reach out and chat, I'd love to talk to them if they have anything particular in mind, or, you know, I mean, I'm sure you can talk to them and let them know that we welcome passion. Okay, great. Okay. Then do I have a motion to close the meeting? Okay. Show of
Second.
hands. Okay, close the meeting at 6:55.
5:55? 5:55.